It's also odd to me that a religion that is supposed to be based on personal experience and faith and, I guess, really emotions and spiritual apprehension rather than evidence, proof, and data, how the people who say that and support that would so quickly deny someone else's personal experience of God. For example, let's say that one Christian has a near-death experience. They have an experience with God that shows them that God could never send anyone to hell, that there's only love, there's only forgiveness, there's only mercy, and the God of the Bible or the God of the universe, whatever, could never send anyone to hell, right? And they are convinced. They had this near-death experience, their entire life has changed, and I've heard stories about this happening. And a fundamentalist Christian is like, well, that's amazing that you had that personal experience, but you're not a true Christian because the Bible doesn't say it. Although I understand that logical argument, like, well, the Bible talks about hell, so you can't be a true Christian. It's strange to me that logic and reasoning will be applied to the interpretation of the Bible in some cases to a point, and then personal experience comes in. Like, when you challenge the Bible and say, well, it doesn't seem like this is consistent, or it seems like there's a contradiction here, you use your logic and reasoning to deconstruct the Bible and show how there's errors in it, then it's like, well, you need to have faith to get past those things. But at the same time, those same people are condemning a person for having faith in a personal experience with God in this NDE because it doesn't line up with the Bible. I see a lot of problems with it now. It seems like this double standard that if you're a fundamentalist Christian, you have to believe certain things, and anyone else who has a personal experience that varies from yours or contradicts your interpretation of the Bible isn't a true Christian. And in my experience, my observation, and I did this too, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to just bash Christians here. I used to do this too. It's very arbitrary. It's like a little hobby of just saying, well, they're probably not a true Christian. They go to that church, oh, they're not a true Christian. Why stir up enmity and strife within your own religious group? Hello, and welcome back to the Steel Woman podcast. I'm your host, Osley, and today I'm going to be talking about some misconceptions and frequently asked questions, trends I've noticed in my comment section, mostly on TikTok. Let's see, how many points do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 things that I want to focus on today. Just to let you know, I'm not going to be talking about my husband's belief. That has come up a lot on TikTok, people asking, and I get it, people are curious, but I'm not going to be addressing that today. So if you're interested in that, just know that that's not something I'm going to be talking about for the foreseeable future. I have made the decision to talk about my beliefs, or lack of belief technically, on the internet, and it's not an easy thing to do, and I by no means want to pressure anyone in my life to share their views. I feel like, this is a burden that I have to bear. It's a choice that I've made. So not going to be talking about that, just to heads up. The first misconception or frequently asked question that I get on my TikTok videos, I don't know actually how many times I've gotten this, but I've gotten it enough times to where it's really bothered me. Do I hate Christians? This makes me sad. Actually, it hasn't been phrased in that way. It's been phrased, why do you hate Christians? That's the type of comment that I get. So it's more accusatory than it is curious. I find these comments really disturbing and sad because I don't hate Christians, but they never are accompanied by any specific examples of things that I've said that I feel it would give an impression that I hate Christians. It's just very vague. And when I've pushed back and I've tried to ask, when have I said that? Or what makes you think that? I get really strange responses to which I'm just like, I don't know how you got that. And it makes me sad because that is not the case at all. So the only theory that I'm really left with is that because I have used words like toxic, abusive, harmful to describe fundamentalist Christian teachings, that some of the theists or Christians watching take those words personally and think that I'm calling them toxic, harmful, and abusive. Like that is a personal attack on their character. So I wanted to give specific examples of fundamentalist Christian teachings that I think are toxic, harmful, and could be used to abuse people. I guess not every single teaching is abusive, because maybe you need some intent in there for it to be abusive. I'm not sure. Maybe not. Maybe technically it's abusive even if it's not meant to be. I guess that's up for debate. But I want to give specific examples of things that I have a problem with, that I was taught. So I have a list here I'm going to read off. Number 1, or let's not number them. Let's just okay. The utter depravity of man, that we all deserve eternal conscious torment. I was taught that, like, God would probably have mercy on babies, but he would also be justified in letting babies go straight to hell because we're born into depravity. How is that not terrible? And I remember explaining this to somebody when I was in college. She was so confused. I remember her looking at me. I was like, well, we can hope that God lets babies go to heaven, but we really can't know that. So like, we just have to trust that his will is best. And I just remember her face. She was also a Christian. She was just like, what? I still stand by that. I don't think the Bible is explicit saying that babies go to heaven. I know there's a verse of like King David saying that he's going to see his son in heaven, but I don't really know that it's not explicit, right? So I don't think that's necessarily an incorrect interpretation of the God of the Bible. Again, I think he's a monster, but I digress. But that, teaching a child that, even if it's subtle, is going to send so many harmful messages to that child. I know it did for me. So much shame, so much guilt, so much fear. Let's keep going with the toxic, abusive, and harmful Christian teachings that I greatly dislike. That people should feel shame for having premarital sex. I was personally victimized by this. It caused a lot of internalized just a lot of problems. We can talk about that another time, purity culture. Viewing people who are a part of the LGBT community as perverted or as an abomination, right? I can't tell you the amount of times that I heard, or I even said myself, when I saw a gay couple, like, oh, that's so sad. I mean, I wouldn't say it to their faces, but to my Christian friends or in my inner circle, just like, it's so sad. Like, it's just, it's a perversion of God's design. Like, that is so problematic. That is definitely an ideology that can lead to violence and a stripping of rights of these people. They have every right to live a consensual, loving relationship with their partner. Anyways, I don't think I have to spell that out for the people who are watching, but maybe I do. Next, that women are responsible for the lustful thoughts of men and hold culpability if they are harassed. For me, I thought that clothing was a form of consent most of my life. That if I wore something and I got harassed, well, you shouldn't have worn that thing. That if a man thought a lustful thought, oh, well, I shouldn't have worn yoga pants. I cannot tell you how disgusting I find that teaching now. I think it is incredibly problematic. And yeah, this teaching gave me so much shame about my body, and I didn't feel like I had bodily autonomy, really. I didn't have the right to wear what I wanted. I didn't have the right to wear what made me feel cute. I had to think about all the other men in my environment, how they might accidentally, get hard if they saw me. It's like, that is such a terrible burden to have to bear. And look, I think definitions of modesty vary greatly. If you want to wear turtlenecks and long pants every single day of your life for the rest of your life, that's fine too. I'm not saying you have to wear crop tops and bikinis. I'm not saying you have to do that at all. I'm just saying it should be your choice. I think it's incredibly problematic if there's people in your life putting pressure on you to wear certain things and shaming you for wearing certain things. That's not okay. That is absolutely disgusting. It's I don't know words. Another one, that anyone who isn't a fundamentalist Christian or conservative evangelical Christian isn't a real Christian. if you voted for Biden, you're not a Christian. That. You might be surprised. You might not be surprised. Maybe you've heard worse. I've heard that personally from people like, well, they voted for Biden, so clearly they're not a real Christian. For a religion that is supposed to support forgiveness and grace and a complete, wiping away of sins, fresh slate, fresh start, to say that someone who votes differently than you isn't a Christian doesn't add up for me. I think it's incredibly close-minded and harmful to yourself and your own Christian community. This "you're not a real Christian if," this "no true Scotsman" fallacy. I've seen it so many times when I was a Christian, and especially since I've left Christianity. Another thing, because we're not done, that I find very harmful is the teaching that children who are acting out or disobeying their parents are exhibiting signs of their depraved evil nature and need to be spanked and or shamed for acting angry or saying things like, "I hate you." I just found out the other week after a therapy session that a child needs to feel free to feel all range of emotions with a parent or a caregiver. If a parent or a caregiver tells a child that you can't hate somebody or you hate God or you can't be angry because this, you're not fixing the problem. You're not addressing the root issue. You're shaming the child and making them close off from you. And that emotion, those feelings are just going to come out in other ways. You have to give space for these emotions. And I was taught to never say hate you. If I hated my brother, I hated God. And that was really harmful to me because emotions are complex. And especially as a kid, you have a lot of them, right? And more often than not, I felt ashamed, or, like, I'm a bad person, I'm a sinner, I have to fix these emotions right now, even when that was not what I needed. I needed guidance and help through those emotions rather than to be shamed for those emotions. So instead, I believe that children need to be understood and helped to navigate and better manage their emotions, rather than just told that they're a sinner and spanked for it and told that you're just rebellious, or yes, this is your sin, you're a sinner, and this is you hate God and you hate man, and so this is what you're doing. That is so confusing and traumatic for a child. You're just reinforcing to that child that they're a bad person. I know that did not help me, and it is only now as an adult that I give myself permission to feel emotions without shaming myself and shutting down, that I can actually process them and find the root of the issue and address them in a productive, loving way. So that's very, very long-winded, but hate might be an appropriate word to describe my intense, passionate dislike for these teachings. But do I hate all Christians or even the specific types of Christians doing these things? No, absolutely not. And I think what's important to clarify here is that even though I talk about my opinions and I'm very critical on my podcast, I do not bring this up in conversation with fundamentalist Christians. Maybe I should, but I don't think I would even call it out if I saw something that I believe to be harmful being done to a child. Maybe I should. Maybe that's bad. I don't know. That's tricky. I really like to give people respect and not criticize their decisions because, I don't know. Give me feedback on that, you guys. What do you think? Should you call it out if you see something harmful happening? Like if you, I don't know. I don't want to be somebody who is just so critical and like, but maybe that's just me not wanting to have conflict. Maybe I should. Also, something that I tend to do is separate ideology or religious beliefs from a person's identity or character. And the reason I do this is because when I was a Christian, I had a lot of cognitive dissonance. Deep down, I think I knew that my beliefs were ugly. I knew that my opposition to the LGBTQ community and my judgment of women who were clothes that were, like crop tops and bikinis, or who had sex outside of marriage, my judgment of other people was wrong. And when I say wrong, I just mean like not loving, not fair, just nasty. I don't know a better word for it, just nasty. And I didn't actually want to believe a lot of these things. I was sad that these things were true, but I was convinced of them nevertheless. I was like, I just have to trust God. I don't like that I can't accept the LGBTQ community. I don't like that I can't support them. I don't like that I can't accept people doing what works for them, but I don't want to burn in hell for eternity, and my God has a standard for me. And if I'm ashamed of the words of Jesus Christ and the words of the Bible, then Jesus is going to be ashamed of me when he comes back. So there is a lot of pressure, and I just tried to keep quiet. It's like, well, I don't want to put myself out there and actually oppose these things, but I can't support them either. And so, yeah, I think there might be a lot more Christians out there who are like that than we realize. They hold these terrible beliefs. They go to churches that support and maybe even preach these ugly things. But when it came down to it, would they stand for those things? I'm really not sure. So I guess I try to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're not malicious, that they don't actually hate people, that they're not bigoted. They just are in a religion. They've been indoctrinated into a religion that puts pressure on them. Like, when I say pressure, I mean hellfire. I believed that hell was real. I was convinced, right? I wasn't happy about it, but it wasn't a choice. I wasn't choosing to believe in hell. I wasn't choosing to believe that LGBTQ the community was going against God's will. I wasn't choosing any of those things. I was just convinced of it, and I was scared of my God. And at the time, I thought that fear was respect, but I don't think that's actually what respect is now. It's also worth noting that a lot more Christians are becoming progressive, and they don't support these beliefs, and they're actually outspoken about these teachings, and they are trying to make changes within their churches, and I hugely appreciate that. So, no, long story short, I do not hate Christians. Last thing I'll say about this is that I understand what it feels like to hear your beliefs criticized as a Christian and to feel like it's a personal attack. I know. I felt that way in college. And I truly believed that I was undergoing forms of persecution in college because people would maybe mock certain beliefs a little bit. And I would just be like, oh, it's so unfair. It's like a double standard. And I think sometimes maybe it is, but more often than not, I think I was just taking very personally the criticisms of the Bible. And like, that's valid. I think those emotions are valid. I don't think that is crazy or anything like that. It probably would have helped me at the time when I was a Christian to realize that these people who were criticizing the Bible didn't hate me. I get it though. It is tricky. Although it might have felt hurtful to me at the time to hear my beliefs being criticized, I really don't think it was harmful to me. I think it was very good for me to hear that there's other people who have criticisms, and I need to either defend my beliefs or I need to analyze my beliefs and deconstruct my beliefs, which I have done now and have, left it all behind, but I don't think that's necessary. So yeah, as much as possible, if we as humans could just remove our identities a little bit from the belief systems that we're in so that we can critically think through them and have a conversation with somebody who has a conflicting opinion without thinking it's a personal attack. It's hard to do, but that is just something I think we need to remember, me included. The second common thing that I've noticed on my videos, and not so much my videos, but just something on deconstruction TikTok in general, is belief a choice or not? I'm not 100% sure, but I would lean towards probably not. I don't think belief is a choice. I think this because I cannot just snap my fingers right now and start believing something or stop believing something. I am either convinced or unconvinced. And though it may look like sometimes it feels like a person is just being stubborn in their beliefs. It's like, why are you believing this? This is so dumb. There's evidence to the contrary, yet you still refuse to be proven wrong. And so it looks like that person is choosing a belief, but I don't think that's a fair assessment, honestly, because what convinces a person, that is outside of the person's control. For example, a few years ago, I watched a horrible conspiracy theory movie on YouTube. And for terrible reasons that were completely unjustified and irrational, I developed a belief in the conspiracy theory of that movie. I was pretty convinced. Maybe I wasn't 100% convinced, but I was convinced. I see now that I had terrible reasons to be convinced, but the elements of that movie that did the convincing, that made me think, oh, wow, this is plausible, that was outside of my control. And that's why I think critical thinking is so important, teaching those skills to our children, to ourselves, because then we have then it's still not a choice what we believe or don't believe, but at least we have better principles to apply to our analysis process of a claim to become convinced for good reasons versus just terrible reasons. I used to really not think that belief was a choice. I totally misspoke here. What I meant to say is I used to think that belief was a choice. Alrighty, carrying on. The reason that I think I thought this was because I have influenced my beliefs on purpose. So in high school, I had a lot of really limiting beliefs, negative beliefs about myself. And through positive affirmations, a little bit of therapy, and listening to a lot of self-help gurus and reading a lot of personal development books, I know it's cringy, but it's true, I was able to develop positive, empowering beliefs about myself. So in a way, it's like, oh, well, then you chose to believe something different. Yes and no. I chose to pursue content and material that would influence me and convince me of a different belief. But whether or not it worked, like that was out of my control, you know? So although I think we have a lot of, and maybe not even a lot, we do have some power over what content we consume. And then you dive into, do we have free will or not? I don't even know. But in the end, what convinces you or does not convince you of a certain claim is out of your control. And I do not think that belief is a choice. It's not clothes that you can just put on and take off. It's something that is developed. So I'm an atheist now, and I'm not choosing to be an atheist. And that is a comment that I've gotten a few times on my TikTok. Like, well, God gives you the free will to believe or not. And I'm like, that's not true. I did research. I read the Bible. I listened to debates, and my belief in God fell away. I became unconvinced. It was as though it was happening to me. It was outside of my control. The more I learned about logical fallacies and critical thinking and all those things, I just realized like, oh, I don't have sufficient reason to believe this anymore, and I'm unconvinced. I can't see any good reasons anymore. It was outside of my control. Now, continuing to listen to those debates, continuing to subject myself to educational content, that was all a choice, right? And there might be some Christians and theists out there who think that that was wrong of me, that I kept going down a dangerous path. To that, I would just say, if applying logic and reasoning to your beliefs means that your beliefs are going to fall away, then you never had good reasons to believe those things to begin with. And that's just the hard facts. And when I say good reasons, I mean logical reasons, justified reasons, rational reasons. If you want to argue that personal experience is a good reason to believe something, maybe it is in your case. Like honestly, if you had a personal experience that changed your life and was profound, and you have a deep belief, like I can't disprove that. That's your personal experience, and that's, you have every right to believe that. And maybe you should be convinced. I don't know, but that wasn't my personal experience, right? And so just like I would say that my personal experience or feelings shouldn't dictate what you believe, I would say mutually, your personal experience and emotions and whatever shouldn't dictate what I believe. It's just not going to be compelling at the end of the day. And if I had a dream that was really compelling, that, Nefertiti was real. Wait, I think she was an Egyptian. Aphrodite. The Aphrodite was real. I don't think it would be fair for me to use that personal experience to try and convince you that she was real. That would just be that'd be my deal. And I'd have every right to worship Aphrodite, but it wouldn't be compelling evidence for anybody else, I hope. I try to remember now that I'm not a Christian anymore, because sometimes it can be really frustrating to me that there's people in my life who believe things that I think are so harmful and terrible, but it's not their choice to believe those things. They're just convinced of it through, reasons that are outside of my control and their control even. Indoctrination is real. Up until 2 months ago, I would never have said I was indoctrinated. Oh my God, no. I would have said, no, I was given a choice to believe it or not. But in reality, the choice that I was given was follow Jesus and go to heaven, or reject Jesus and go to hell. I wasn't given a choice of whether or not to believe the claims of the Bible. My parents didn't sit me down and say, hey, so we believe in the Bible. We believe in the God of the Bible, but you don't have to, and we could be wrong. And so I encourage you to go seek out other belief systems and apply critical thinking to everything. This might not be true. That was never once said to me that I remember. It was just, hell is real. If you don't admit that you're a sinner, you're going to go there. It's your choice. That's indoctrination. The third misconception that I've seen a lot is, so you believe that God doesn't exist? No. That would be a positive atheist. I'm a negative atheist, or a weak atheist, a soft atheist. So you have different types of atheism. And I know for some people who've never heard that, it's probably like, oh my God, here we go. Oh, of course. But hey, all I'll say is this. How many denominations of Christianity are there? Yeah, so sit the fuck down. I'm just kidding. So there's different types of atheists, and I'll give a recommendation below of a video that I think does an excellent job at spelling it all out, much better than I'm probably going to do right now. I would also recommend going to the American Atheist website, because they give the most common definition of atheism that I would say a majority of atheists are going to be using today, and that is a lack of belief in God. So that's different than believing that there are no gods. So I have a lack of belief in God. I'm a negative atheist. But I could have a belief that God does not exist, which would be positive atheist. It's a positive statement. It's a claim. You actually believe in something. The form of atheism I subscribe to is just a lack of belief. I'm not just a negative atheist, though. I would also classify myself as an agnostic atheist. You could call me an epistemological atheist if you just can't stand saying agnostic atheist because you think they're the same thing. But I'm hopefully going to clear up why they're not the same thing. So let's first define agnosticism. So agnosticism is the view that the existence of God or the supernatural are unknown or unknowable. Let's look up atheism now. Atheism is a disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. So agnosticism addresses what you know. Atheism addresses what you believe. Agnostic means without knowledge. Atheism means without belief in God. Gotcha. Yeah. I think most people know that. I just wanted to clear that up. So now let's define knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge is commonly defined philosophically as justified true belief. So you may be thinking, well, knowledge has to do with belief. It does, but there are very important distinctions between belief and knowledge. And I think what's key here is the justified true part. You could believe something without justification for it and without it being true. For example, I could believe in a conspiracy theory, but not have justified reasons for it, and it also not be true. If I know that a theory is true, I would be justified in believing it, and it would also be true. So if you're interested in the difference between knowledge and belief, highly recommend, I can't remember, I think it's called Philosophy Vibes. a YouTube channel that goes into the difference and also talks about the Gettier problem, I think is how you say it, Gettier, and it gets really complicated. But I just wanted to clear that up because there was a few people in my TikTok comments saying, well, knowledge is a type of belief. It is belief. You can't, you know something, you believe something. It's like, okay, they're cousins, not twins. You know, there's distinctions there that are really important. You can know something, or you could believe something. It's going to be very different. And what actually counts as knowledge? Books, my friend. Many books probably written on the subject, many debates, many arguments, and I just don't have time to get into it, but I think the justified true belief is a pretty good definition of that. Belief is the attitude we have roughly when we take something to be the case or regard it as true. So, yeah, you're convinced of something or you're not, and it could be for really bad reasons. You could hear that, oh, so-and-so was abducted by aliens and believe them. But do you have justified reasons to believe that? Is it true? Do you actually have knowledge or do you just have a belief? I hope that makes sense. So the important distinction between knowledge and belief: knowledge, is it justified and true? Belief, I have my notes here, is it merely a state of being convinced of something? You also have different levels of agnosticism. So a weak agnostic would be somebody who doesn't know but doesn't think it's impossible to know. A strong agnostic would believe that it is impossible to know, to have knowledge, to have justified true belief in something. So that's why I'm an agnostic and I'm an atheist. Well, okay, maybe I couldn't say and. No, I'm pretty sure you can say and. Because so technically an agnostic does not have a stance. Like if I were just agnostic, I wouldn't have a stance on belief in God. I would just have a stance on whether or not I can have justified true belief or knowledge in God. So I'm an agnostic atheist because I don't think it's possible to know. I guess I would be a strong agnostic, and I would be a negative atheist, agnostic atheist. I hope that makes sense. Just think the most clear way that I've heard it explained: agnosticism is about what you know. Atheism is about what you believe. They answer two different questions. The distinctions between knowledge and belief are very important. All right, let's move on. I hope that was helpful and not just more confusing and troubling. Number 4, and the final one, how to stop fearing hell. I've had a lot of people ask, how did you stop being afraid of hell? I have so much anxiety about what if I'm wrong? And this is hard, and I have a lot of sympathy for people, or empathy, whichever one it is, for people who still after leaving Christianity are afraid of hell, because hell was, oh my gosh, it was a huge point of psychological trauma and anxiety for me growing up, and even into my adulthood after I had my born again experience as a child and then into adulthood. I was afraid, what if I'm the Christian who, when I die, God looks at me and says, I never knew you? Like, that's just, it was awful. I didn't realize how much it bothered me until I've lost my belief in hell. I no longer think that it's real. I think it's just made up. Living like that, oh yeah, anyways. So rather than giving you advice, I will share what worked for me. And when I say worked, I don't mean that I set out to stop believing in hell. I didn't follow some 4-step plan that I found, but these are the things that I believe were the most impactful to me in the journey of letting go of even my belief in hell. I didn't know that it was possible for me to stop believing in hell. If I could have known a year ago that I would be in a place now where I genuinely, it's not even one of my fears. And I'm a fearful person. I'm highly anxious. I do have fears about other things. That hell is not one of them. I probably would have broke down sobbing because the relief and the would have just been so great. So let this be a hopeful message to you that if you're currently stuck in this fear of hell, you can get out. And I hope that what I say helps. one of the most helpful resources for me was Bart Ehrman's podcast, and he recently wrote a book called Heaven and Hell, A History of the Afterlife, which deconstructed the idea of biblical hell and went into the history of the afterlife from the Old Testament and the New Testament. And it really just revealed to me that hell, the idea of eternal conscious torment, burning in a flame for all time, not being able to die, just being tortured, has developed. It's not even biblical. For those of you who are thinking about the parable of, I think it is Lazarus, who the rich man and the poor man, who Jesus talks about, I guess the rich man is in hell and he's saying, please tell my family, and the people in heaven are like, sorry, no can do, bro. He addresses that in the book Heaven and Hell. He also addresses that in his podcast and interviews. I can't remember the answer he gave now, but I think it's a parable. It wasn't supposed to be like a prediction of what is going to happen. It wasn't supposed to be a definition of the afterlife. It was a parable. And so just go listen to that if that's the first thing that jumped into your mind, because for me it was at the time. I was like, what about the rich man burning in hell? So as I stopped believing in the claims of the Bible, because I was learning about how the Bible was written and compiled, the lack of evidence that we have for the authors of the Gospels really being Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, as much as just being the people attributed to those books, my belief in the claims fell away. My belief in hell also fell away. There are so many points to cover, and I don't trust myself to go into them because there's just so many details. I highly recommend you checking out Bart Ehrman's interviews that he's done, and maybe even giving the book a listen or a read. I was listening to it on Audible, that's why I said listen. Learning about how the idea of hell developed and really just how the Bible was compiled made me start to wonder, like, I wonder if there's any incentive, or what could have been the incentive to create the idea of eternal conscious torment. Could it be that it was a manipulation tactic to gain more converts and keep people in religion, keep people afraid of deconverting or going astray? Could it be? If it is, that's a really effective manipulation tactic. And if there's one thing I hate, it's being manipulated. And so I think a little bit of just resistance. I was like, no, I'm not going to let some old dude from like hundreds of years ago or whenever like scare me into believing stuff that doesn't make sense. That pisses me off, honestly. Like, F the patriarchy, you know? So it's like, I don't believe in these claims. There's no good reason for me to believe that eternal conscious torment is even a thing, because it's not biblical. And wow, this was probably just a manipulation tactic. And also, how many hours of my life have I spent worried about going to hell in any other belief system, Islam or Judaism? I don't even know if they have a hell in Judaism, or Hindu, whatever. How many hours have I wasted thinking about those hells? None. Zero, because I wasn't indoctrinated into those belief systems. So I guess I kind of just zoomed out a little bit and realized I don't have good reasons to believe this. And I'm sure as hell, no pun intended, not going to let my fear of hell keep me from living my life. This is the one life that I get. And I don't believe it's real. Because here's the thing, what would be the point of that? Eternal conscious torment? What? It's just psychological terror. It is just a psychological terror technique. That is all it is to me. I don't see how that it even makes sense. Eternal conscious torment? Really? I have no problems with thinking that I might be punished in an afterlife for some of the bad things that I've done while I was here on earth. I think that's fair. But tormented for all eternity? You kidding? No one deserves that. So yeah, I guess maybe that'll help. I really, really recommend just listening to Bart Ehrman's stuff on it and listening to people talking about it and deconstructing these ideas. That was the most helpful thing for me. It wasn't something I really had to work through as much as it just fell away the more that I learned about the Bible. All right, I think that's it. I don't know if this was a really long one today. I feel like I've been talking and rambling forever. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful, and I will talk to you again next week. Take care. Bye.
Hey, Pumpkin.